Hi everybody, welcome to the Creation Ship. I'm Creative Katie, Karen Burchill. Today we're going to do an art journal spread, and this one's for the beginners. We're going to cover some basics. So I'm starting with this Chicks in Bunny Meadow. And I know it's not Easter, but I'm going to turn this Easter napkin into something that I can just do any time of year. Now the orientation was in a certain way, and it has these Easter eggs, but you know what? I can just cut those out. I'm not limited by what's there. So advice number one for the beginners, cut apart your napkins. Isolate the parts that you like, and then that allows you to manipulate them and figure out where you want them on the page. You could move them together. I can change the orientation. And set up how I want it to look. Now you need a background. Now a quick way to get a background is to put rice paper. Now I was drawn to the pastel colors, so I grabbed this Garden Glory 7. This is Ninny's Napkins rice paper. But I want the colors that are there. I'm going to jump start the process. I don't want to work too hard. So I found colors that I like. Now if you don't have rice paper, you can use a gel print. You can use something from a magazine. All that you are looking for is the colors. I like that pastel, yellow, green, pink, and you'll see why as we progress. Now I'm just putting this across the top, and then I'm going to put my chicks at the bottom. I'm water cutting the excess of the rice paper off by using a generous amount of water and then ripping it. That gives me a deckled edge, which shows up less later down the road. And it's just what I prefer. So now that everything is set up, I've got my background color and my focal image, I'm going to start gluing things down. Now I use Liquitex Fluid Matte Medium. You can get the Basics version as well. I get whatever's cheapest. I don't find any difference between the two. And I'm putting a generous coat underneath and on top. I'm even layering up pieces of that rice paper. I'm peeling off the backings from the napkin. There's 2 excess plies. You want to make sure you take both. And then I am going to glue that down where I've decided to place it after everything's dry. And once again, a coat underneath and a coat on top. Now, the rice paper will stand up to pretty rough treatment. The napkin will rip once it's wet because it gets very, very fragile. So you need to be a little gentler with it than the rice paper. Rice paper is very forgiving. So I've decided to put that there, and I've moved the one flower over here and gluing that down. And once again, I will make sure everything is dry. Now I'm grabbing unbleached titanium, which I'm putting in on all the white areas. This is just neutralizing it. I'm going on top of the rice paper where there's white and on the raw background of my mixed media paper and in between the chicks. I just want to get a good neutral color down there. And unbleached by titanium really fits the bill. I don't know what I did without unbleached titanium for the first 4 or 5 years as I was art journaling. Now you could keep the flowers of that rice paper and have the chicks kind of in the garden. And I kind of want that feel, but I really want to neutralize that as well. My goal is to just have the chicks be the focal point. And to neutralize that background, knock it back so I don't really see flowers, but I do get all those colors, I am using a stenciling technique. This stencil is called Fence Grid, and it's from the Crafter's Workshop. And it's an open one. There's quite a bit of gap. Now I'm using white acrylic paint. And what this does when I stencil right over top of all that rice paper, it just knocks it back. So all you're seeing are the colors, and it's very pastel, and it's just beautiful. Then I decided I should colorize. I've got a little bit of excess. The rice paper didn't quite go to the end, so I'm just adding a little bit of green and pink there, just so you don't see the edge. And you'll see in the end, you don't make that out at all. So back to stenciling, and I'm going to use this same stencil right across where the rice paper is. And the goal with the white again is to neutralize that background so you don't see the flowers, you don't see the leaves, but you get all that luscious color. How easy is that? I didn't have to mix colors, I didn't have to put colors, I didn't have to get paint out, but I get all the benefit. Now again, if you don't have rice paper or scrapbook paper that you aren't exactly fond of, that would be a good place to use it. You can use from magazines, catalogs. Find something that has the colors that you like and then stencil over it with white, and that will knock it back, soften it, and give you this luscious pastel-y type background. I keep putting the stencil on and going over it if I want it to be a little bit more opaque. Now I wanted to grunge this up a little bit and add another detail, so I'm putting the stencil back on. I've got a small script stamp, my black archival ink, and I'm stamping through the stencil. Not every single one of those are getting stamped on, but it's really grunging it up and just adding one more layer. Stamping through the stencil technique works best when you have wide open stencils, not tiny gaps, but bigger, like this one, this fence grid one. I'm loving how this is all coming together, and really, it's so easy. You don't need the exact stencil or background that I have to do the same thing. Use what you have, and it'll give a slightly different effect, but it's about the techniques. That's what you want to learn. Now I'm edging the page with black acrylic paint. This frames the page. And I know I'm going to be putting a sentiment on that is going to have black in it. So that's just going to work together. And there's some darker black on the chicks. Now this page is a 9x12. It's from my Canson Mixed Media art journal. Now I want to colorize the chicks, just tweak the color of them just a little bit, make them a little darker so they stand up a little bit more against the background. I'm using Inktense Blocks. You can use watercolor, you can use acrylic paints, although some are more opaque, and that you need to water them down. You can skip this step. This is not critical, but I do a lot of overpainting over napkins to tweak the color over any of my focal images for that matter. And it's a good skill to learn, and it's one that you'll use a lot. Now I'm adding more flowers, and I am just really just smearing paint here. And it gives the illusion of being the same kind of flowers that were with the napkin. And I want to spread it across the entire bottom. Because I love that purple color and I want that to show a little bit more. So I'm just adding it. And I'm just getting the Inktense and globbing it on. The eye will tell you, is going to see these as flowers. Your brain does a trick with you there. So I'm going to have some all across the bottom there. And I'm just mixing a couple of the colors of my Inktense blocks. Again, part of this is I want the bottom to have a heavier weight. That's the focal image. I want that to be there. So I want those colors to be stronger. So at the top, I've used the white. At the bottom, I've used darker colors. I'm adding a little bit of that purple into the top, and I'm wiping it down. I just want a hint of it, just so that everything is working together. And I'm liking how that turned out. I grabbed some dioxazine purple acrylic paint, I thinned it down, and I'm just going to splatter the top part with the purple. This introduces more of that purple to the top part, and the splatters just add another layer of interest very, very simply. And I'm using my fan brush to splatter with. Once that's dry, I grab my charcoal. This is a General's charcoal pencil, and I'm just lightly sketching around the chicks just to give them a little bit more definition so they stand out. I don't want a solid line. I don't want to take like a Sharpie marker and outline it in black. That's not a look I like. I want it a little bit sketchy, just a little bit of shading there. So sometimes you'll see me rubbing it to soften the edges. I just want a little bit more definition against the background. I know it seems odd being September and I'm doing a rather springish type page, but I've been doing a lot of fall colors and I wanted to just do a different color palette. Now I got my wooden letter stamps out and I stamped on a piece of scrap paper hanging with my peeps, and I cut it out. This allows me to, again, play with the orientation. So I know exactly where it is. It allows me to figure out the spacing so you don't have any oops. So now I know where I want to start, and I'm stamping. I'm putting black acrylic paint on that blending foam and using it kind of like a stamp pad and stamping out the phrase hanging with my peeps, because everything underneath is permanent. If I make a mistake, I can grab a baby wipe and wipe it off and restamp, like you see me doing right here. And you can't do that when you're stamping with ink, so that's why I prefer stamping with acrylic paint. So I'm positioning this, and I will continue stamping with black acrylic paint on the blending foam, using it as a stamp pad. And I've got capitals and lowercase letters. And I'm not trying to get it perfectly lined up. You're never going to get that. So embrace the imperfections. Go for random and you'll be happier. I had this butterfly that I stamped. This was, I think, I'll put a link to the company that makes these stamps down below. And they were just sitting on my table, so I thought, oh, you know what? They kind of fit this whole feel. So I put around them, and I shaded around them, and that was off camera. So there we have our finished page. Love the pastel look that we achieved by stenciling over top of some colored paper. The focal image on the bottom. I love adding the flowers at the bottom. I hope you find this useful. I hope it inspires you. Until next time, go get creative.